Hello and welcome, my name is Thomas, and in this video I'm going to share with you my top 5 favorite features in Bear. Okay, so a while back I created a video all about an app that has become very much a daily part of my creative workflow, and that is an app called Bear. In that previous video, which I'll link below, I actually talked about how I use Bear to write just about anything. I would write emails, I would write Slack messages, I would write blog posts, even video descriptions for my videos here on YouTube, just about anything that I wanted to write that was over a paragraph in length. I would write using Bear. So there's a number of different reasons for this, some of which I'll be getting into here just in a moment with some of my favorite features. But the biggest reason I like Bear so much is because it is just simple and clean. One of the biggest problems I have with so many different writing and productivity apps out there is that you get the feeling from different developers and creators of these apps that they don't really know how they want you to use it. So what they do is they throw tons of features at you and you're just supposed to figure out how to use it or how to organize it, or that's why there's so many different tutorials out here on YouTube about how to go through and create this system using Evernote or this system using Notion. Don't get me wrong, I like both of those apps, but for simply writing or for a clean, uncluttered writing experience, Bear has been the best app I've found yet. So if you're not already familiar with Bear, it is a Mac as well as an iOS app. So if you do have a Windows machine, unfortunately you can't use Bear. There's some others that are pretty similar in terms of their scope, in terms of the functionality that they have built in, but this is going to work specifically on a Mac and iOS devices. Okay, so the first feature that drew me to Bear originally is the fact that it has something called Markdown built into it. So if you're not already pretty familiar with Markdown, Markdown is essentially kind of its own writing or coding language, I guess you could say, but it's not complicated. You're not doing a bunch of HTML tags or anything like that. Instead, what you're doing is you're just writing, and say for example, let's go ahead and pop in here and I'll give you a quick example of how this works. By the way, I'm working within an iPad, so yours might look a little bit different if you're on an iPhone or if you are using the desktop version, but the same kind of general concept will apply. The great thing about something like Bear, let's give this here, is a great headline, and it'd be great if I could spell, there we go. So if we jump in here, the nice thing about using something like Bear is you can just say, or something like Markdown within Bear, you can say here is something that is italicized. And then as you can see, it's italicized, so it's just one of those things that you can start doing as you are typing. And if you want to make, a bulleted list right here. And then the great thing about Bear is it just kind of continues those bulleted lists for you. And then if you say here is you could just simply, and I probably should have done this before typing the sentence, but you can just hit a caret, hit space, and then you've got yourself a nice little block quote. Let's do some, some more text, and you can kind of start to see that build a block quote. But that's one of the things that I've really liked about Bear is the fact that it's all Markdown based, and it's just a great way to write really efficiently without ever having to take your hands off the keyboard. Obviously I did to kind of move my mouse cursor around, but when I'm kind of in the flow of writing paragraph after paragraph, having something that you do not need to remove your hands from the keyboard can help you continuously not only get your thoughts down, because you want to get those kind of out of your head and onto the screen as quickly as possible, but you can be more efficient because you can add the formatting as you go without having to break your train of thought and start clicking around. Now, if you want to, down here they do have all the different options for you. So if you don't want to memorize different parts of Markdown, you don't have to. Like if you want to add in a link or something like that, it's pretty easy. I mean, there's also keyboard shortcuts as well, so you can just hit Control or Command K, and that's gonna, enter it in there so that you can add in a link and that sort of thing. But being able to go through here and add Markdown has become part of what has made this so efficient. Okay, and the next feature that I like, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to expound upon it a little bit, is the simplicity of Bear. like I mentioned with some of the other apps out there, is that you get the sense that they don't really know what they want you to use the app for. Bear does one thing and it does that really well. It always keeps that in focus, which is writing. So like I said, the Markdown writing experience is a big part of that. One of the things you can see in here is that you've got like this nice list of things that you're working on, and it's almost kind of like your email inbox. So you're just going through and you're writing, and that's all that you're focusing on. Then they have a nice, and we'll touch on some of the more organizational things in the next kind of feature that I want to break down. But I've always been a huge fan of the fact that it's just not feature rich. I know that sounds kind of funny because when you're talking about an app and your favorite features, you would think, hey, maybe I've got a lot of features to choose from. But the fact is, I'm glad that Bear doesn't have what's called rich text formatting, because that's not what it's for. It's not for doing really fancy formatting or anything like that. I'm really glad that it doesn't have a ton of integrations with third-party apps, because again, that's not really what it's for. But the point remains the same. The reason why I've continued to use Bear for over a year now is because they haven't strayed away from what Bear is for: a clean, simple writing experience. Okay, the next thing that I like about Bear, the next feature I wanted to share with you, is its organization. So while it is simple, it does have some very powerful organizational tools built into it. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. Again, its simplicity is kind of what makes its organization so powerful. So if you go up here and you click on notes, which is going to be kind of at the top of your sidebar, you're going to notice that this essentially is going to be all of the kind of active notes. So I like to, the way I organize this is I go through and I just keep only things that I'm currently working on stay in this main notes section. Then if you want, you can actually organize by untagged. I don't really use tags a lot. If you want to create like a way I think of tags would be, if you're familiar with stories in Twitter, where you can create a story and then add a tweet to it, add a tweet to it, add a tweet to it, so it all encompasses one kind of collection of things, then I'll start using a hashtag. So like, for example, if I wanted to, I could go in here and I can add in, like, let's say I'm working on my book. Let's say I'm writing a book or something like that, and I want to split these into chapters. Then what I could do is just kind of start adding that hashtag to every single one of those. And then within this main folder, if I want to, you'll see here that this tag shows up. Click on that and then you can kind of sort that way. That's really the only way I use tags. I don't use them very often for like what most people would use folders for. I don't sit here and like sort every single note into a specific place, and you'll see why here in a second. Then I'm able to go in here and should be able to actually delete this. I'm not sure how to do it on an iPad. There we go. So you can actually delete that. So then it deletes it from all of those particular notes. Those notes don't go away. The name on those just kind of change. So hashtags or tags are one way that you can kind of build collections within Bear. You can also sort within your notes section by things that have to-dos in them. So I don't use this as like a productivity app. I'll use it sometimes for doing checklists if there's specific things that I want to, kind of do over and over again. So at that point, that kind of comes handy. And one of the things that's kind of neat, if you do want to use their to-do functionality built into Bear, is they'll actually show the progress down here. This is actually a progress bar that if I start checking these off, you'll notice that that bar actually goes across further. So it's kind of a cool way to build in that part of it if to-dos are going to be something that you're going to use pretty heavily. Today, I don't really use the today feature that much, but it's just things that you've actually edited today, something that you're working on recently. And then the fact that you can also create locked notes, which I'll be touching on a little bit here later. But here's really the powerful thing. So what I do, and kind of going back to the importance of simplicity, is like I mentioned, these are going to be all the things that I'm currently working on or things that are kind of active. If I write an email, for example, let's just say that this thing that we were messing with right here was an email. I send the email off. Well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to archive that. So then it gets off my list of things that are currently active and it pops into my archive. Now, originally when I first started using Bear, I would tag everything like I mentioned. But when I realized how powerful their search feature was, I stopped doing that. So now what I do is I go through, and it is the fastest, cleanest search feature I think I've ever used. And so you can sit there and you can go through hundreds, if not thousands of notes and search them instantly so that I have no problem at all finding things. One of the reasons why it is such a benefit to use something like Bear as your starting point, like I've had people ask me in the past, so, well, if you're writing an email, why don't you just open your email window and just start writing in that, email window? Or if you're starting a blog post, why don't you start in WordPress? The benefit of always having a place like Bear to start with is that, number one, it's really easy to write in. But number two, if you're ever trying to reference something and for whatever reason your email software isn't searching properly, or you can't remember, was that a blog post? Was that a video? What site did I post that on? You don't have to worry about that. You just jump into Bear, type in a few keywords, there it is. And if you want to get really fancy, you can even add to the end of your Bear note a link to where this thing is going to be published so that you can always reference that later. But the nice thing is you have this private, secure, lightning fast database of everything you've ever written. And you don't have to worry about cluttering anything else up. You don't have to sort through, let's say, a Dropbox folder with hundreds of Word documents. It's just all enclosed within the app Bear. And best of all, which this is kind of an aside, but you can even export all of these notes if you want to use in another format. Okay, and the fourth feature that I wanted to share with you is a pretty short one, but it is really important. And that is the ability to sync between your iOS and Mac devices. So I have an iPad Pro, I have an iPhone, and I have a MacBook Pro. All three of these devices have Bear installed, and I have definitely put this to the test, to the point where I've been seeing that as I'm working something, if I have my iPad up and open, and let's say I'm working on my MacBook Pro, I've actually watched as that particular note that I'm working on updates and syncs instantly. So if this is going to be important, if you're on the go pretty frequently, I've even noticed, like if I'm sitting at the, on an airport waiting for a flight, I've been on my phone on Bear and I've been like typing up show notes. And then the moment I sit down at my laptop, those show notes are ready for me to start working on. Okay, and by far my favorite feature built into Bear, aside from the writing workflow itself, is all of its export features. So one of the reasons I initially started using Bear was because, of course, first of all, I wanted that clean writing experience, but second of all, I wanted to make sure that it would play nice with something like WordPress or an email app or something like that without messing up the formatting. So when I first started out making a lot of WordPress websites or themes for people who would then be using those websites, what I found was that a lot of people were copy and pasting from Word documents and finding out that once they copied and pasted into WordPress and they published the post would be all messed up. All the formatting and spacing wouldn't look right and the fonts weren't rendering properly. And the reason is because if you're copying from something like Word or other rich text editors, what you end up with is a bunch of extra code that WordPress then has to try to translate into something that is readable on the front end. The nice thing about Bear is that since you're writing in essentially plain text, which is essentially what Markdown is, you can copy in what's known as clean HTML. So then if you want to, you can just copy and paste into the HTML tag or tab within WordPress, and it translates perfectly. Or you can even copy it as rich text. So let's go ahead and pop in here and take a look at what exactly that looks like. So if I were to take this text here, then you see that I've got these copy as options. And again, this is going to look a little bit different on an actual desktop than it will on this iOS device. But then you'll see here you've got some options. You can copy it just as plain text, so it strips out all the italics and bolds and check marks. You can copy it just as it is, which is Markdown format. You can then copy it as rich text, which is going to be RTF. You can also copy the HTML, and then you can only copy the highlighted part. So then that means you can easily just pop this right into whatever format you want it to be. If you've got a lot of italics and bold, and you're going to be pasting this into your email client or something like that, then you just want to copy it as RTF. There you go. All that formatting will be retained and it'll be clean. There won't be any extra spacing or code or any other things in there that's going to mess up the formatting. One of the other things that you can do in terms of exporting is up here you'll have this kind of option, and this has always been amazing to me, is the fact that you can look through all these different formats. You can export this as a text document, Markdown document, PDF, HTML, RTF, an actual Word doc, or even as a JPEG image. And you can't do this here because it's on an iPad, but on the actual Mac version, you can actually click on that icon of a PDF, drag it to your desktop, and it instantly exports. So it's a great way if you just want a clean, simple document that you want to send to someone. This is a great way to be able to do this. But you can just go ahead and click, and then that gives you an instant preview of what that PDF is going to look like. And then of course within the iPad you can export that to a number of different places very simply and easily. One of the other things that they have built in here as well, and this is kind of an aside, but you can actually see the number of words and character count. But one of the things I've actually found really useful, particularly in those rare cases if I'm going to be speaking off like a teleprompter or something like that, and I want to be able to know about how long this is going to take to read, it'll actually calculate a reading time for you, which is great. And then you can also see the last place this was edited as well as when it was created. Okay, and one other quick thing I wanted to share with you, just kind of a bonus feature which I recently discovered and you find myself using every now and then, is the fact that you can actually password protect your notes now. So if for whatever reason maybe you've got someone who's working in here with you, you can actually, like let's say you're sharing an account with someone and you don't want them to see it, or you just want it to be very secure so that if it happens to pop up at some point, you can make sure that only you can view it. You can pop in here and then you can add a password. So let's just go ahead and say, let's go ahead and add a password. There we go. And then once we click away from that, you'll notice that it's unlocked, but that's because it's currently using, if I just see here, I can actually lock it. There we go. And you'll see here that we can actually unlock it with the password, or if you're using a device that supports it, you can also do the facial recognition. So I can just click on that, click OK. There we go, it's unlocked. So if you want to be extra secure, if you're going to be storing passwords or something, which I generally don't recommend storing passwords in anything that kind of gets synced online, but if you're going to be, you can at least add something, an extra layer of security in there if you want to, or privacy and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's it. Those are my favorite features built into Bear. I'm going to leave a link below this video. If you're not already using Bear and you've got an iOS or a Mac device, I highly recommend that you give it a try. It's also one of the most affordable options I've seen. You can just use the app for free, or you can pay for their Pro account, which has a lot of the more advanced features that we've went through in this video, and it's going to be like $15 a year. So pretty incredible value for all that this app enables you to do. So I highly recommend, if nothing else, if you've got an iOS device or a Mac, try at least the Pro version, or I should say try the free version, upgrade to the Pro version if you find it useful. So as always, if you found this video useful, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.